our research has found at a global level, 60 to 85% of all digital transformation projects, quote unquote, either fail to meet expectations. But it's not because of technology. It's because of the people that are having to deploy the tech. I want to start with this. Why must digital transformation also now include human transformation?
I think it's the core, as you just said. It doesn't matter just to implement some new technology or some new system or platform. It's kind of the people who's behind it who has to operate, who needs to take this in. So not or avoiding to talk about how people change around it is a big mistake from my point of view. So I think it's the core of everything. If you want to have a successful digital transformation, you definitely need to look at the human side of it for sure.
What is it, though, that at least up to this point within financial services, maybe there hasn't been a focus on human transformation yet, although I'm starting to see the narrative change, particularly through the COVID experience and beyond. But why has it maybe been slow to think about human transformation in the context of digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, James Robert. I think part of it is that people actually do know that it takes time for people to sort of navigate around new stuff, but they don't really they overestimate how quickly they think that people can take in new habits, new ways of working, new ways of looking at things. So they kind of tend to underestimate that task, I would say. And another thing related to that is that, like, as leaders, as business leaders, usually you're quite over optimistic also of what your team can cope with. So what I usually talk a lot with people about is creating slack. So one of the first things we look into is actually what can we take off the plate and not put more on to it. So that's at least one interesting angle to this, I think.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. One of my favorite exercises to work with an organization through or a team through is to create a don't do list. I think it's so easy to want to add more things to the list to do, but back to your point about Slack, if we're already working at 80, 90, 95, 100% capacity, then it's very hard to create space and time to learn and to think and to review what we've done. This idea of thinking is something that I've been thinking a lot about, if you will. Dan Sullivan, he always says, we got to take time to think about our thinking. And I know holistic thinking can help financial brands really consider the human side of transformation. And that's where things like behavioral design and neuroscience come into play. Let's unpack some of this for those who are watching or listening. What is holistic thinking, and where's the opportunities here?
Yeah, I would say, to me at least, holistic thinking is definitely about going in the helicopter, as the word also says. But for me, it's a variety of things that you need to go through. So it's the business strategy, it's the ecosystem, of course, you need to consider. Then it's the processes and the structures as well. I often see so that people are implementing new technology, and then they are kind of lacking a bit to look at all the processes and structures that goes behind it. They are only focusing on the customer side of it because the customer centricity is really popular, right? That's usually where companies nowadays start because they really want to create good customer journeys. And of course, that's really, really important. But then what I often see is that they are then lacking the behind the scenes stuff and really looking into what kind of impact will this have on our structures, on our processes, and then definitely the people part, as we were just discussing, the new ways of working, the way that we are treating the customer in different part of the organization. So the whole value chain basically also. And then the culture and the staff engagement is really important to also create this optimal customer experience. So I would say you have to go around the full wheel here.
Yes, and to your point, the idea of CX or customer experience, it was, I would say, the hot topic from 2010 to 2020.
Yeah.
Even whenever I wrote Banking on Digital Growth, I wrote it through a lens of what I call DX plus HX equals growth, meaning a positive digital experience when combined with a positive human experience is the path towards growth. Very quickly, though, however, through the COVID experience, I realized that I missed a key element in growth, in transformation, which is the EX, the employee experience, because a brand's customer experience, a brand's digital experience, a brand's human experience is only going to be as positive as the employee experience internally. What are you seeing on that front right now through the work you're doing around employee experience? How are internal teams feeling at the present moment when it comes to change and transformation?
I think we have a good long way to go there still. So I fully echo you on this one. I see exactly the same, that the whole employee part has been really lacking. The understanding of how these connects and interconnect has been missed in a lot of this, and it's back to the understanding of how we as humans actually take on change. So it's really also a lot about how managers actually learn how to cope around these changes. So they don't understand that maybe they've been sitting in their sort of business team for half a year, or maybe sometimes even longer, to create a new strategy or like product or something like that, a new vision, and then they expect everybody to take this in quite quickly. So they are overestimating again how quickly their organization is going to adapt to this. And it might even be so that they don't even understand what they are talking about. So we as humans also have very different perspectives on, understanding what comes to us because of our different lenses, right? So I think that it would be really valuable if C-level managers and business managers in general were more interested in the whole neuroscience and the behavioral design perspectives of how people actually take on change.
Let's talk about that, because when you think about digital transformation and human transformation, digital transformation, it's ones and zeros. And I know there's a lot of discussion around data right now. But I am making an argument. No, that's great. But behind every data point is DNA. It's the human experience, if you will. Where does the practice or the science of neuroscience, behavior modification, how does that fit into the context of this type of thinking? And maybe also, why is there a gap today within that realm that could be the lack of knowledge is an impediment to future growth from an employee experience standpoint?
Yeah, I think one thing at least to dig into, which I think is quite interesting and very basic when it comes to the neuroscience, is the dual process theory. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's the system 1 and 2, the way that we actually take decisions as humans.
Yep.
And for me, this is quite centered around also when we are doing these transformations. So basically, what system 1 is all about is the fact, intuitive, unconscious stuff that we do. So it's that system we use when we are basically brushing our teeth, running a bike, or something like that. So that's everything that is system 1. And then we have a system 2 as well, which is slow, reflecting. It's controlled, and it's more thinking about the future. It's rational. And as you can probably already hear from what I'm saying here, system 2 is a bit slower as well. And this is where we really use a lot of energy when we're using that system. So generally, we are, as humans, we are quite lazy, right?
Yes.
We don't want to use more energy than we have to. So that means that for everybody, we are trying to use as much of our energy on system 1. That's the easy part. So when we have to do things differently, for instance, in a digital transformation, where we are now implementing a new solution that demands people maybe to work differently or think differently or react differently towards a customer, then we are actually putting system 2 into work here. And what managers often don't realize is that this is going on. So they expect people just to take this in and just go on as this is just easy peasy things, but it's actually really not. So understanding how we as humans actually take decisions and how we actually cope with things like this is a very valuable, I would say, first stepstone in trying to change the way that we actually implement digital transformations.
Absolutely. And the idea of system one, system two thinking, the book Thinking Fast and Slow expands upon some of this perspective here. I'm glad you touched on the idea too of the amount of energy that is required with these different types of system one and system two thinking. That's one of the reasons I think anytime you undergo any type of change, whether that be digital transformation, whether that be you want to get healthier, you want to start a new routine, there's going to be some type of energy that is required and why it can feel tiring. Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote a great book called Willpower Doesn't Work. And it's the idea that when we try something new, we can have the amazing amount of willpower, but it's like a muscle. It's going to eventually tire and fatigue. And that's why setting up an environment for change or transformation is so critical, because the environment plays such a key role in that. Let's stay on this subject here a little bit further. What are the opportunities to help an individual or help a team, help an organization navigate this system one, system two, energetic perspective around change? Simply, we're creating some awareness here. People might not even been thinking about that, but where are the opportunities?
I see a lot of different opportunities in this, because I think that if we really start working with the transformation differently, we will actually create capacity to take them in, and then you'll see longer terms transformations that will actually hold. Because just as you were explaining, you see a lot of peaks, like people are very excited first hand on something, and then you maybe create an MVP, or it goes very well the first months of this, and then it goes down again, and then you're back to square one. So I think if you're starting to understand how people react around this one, you will actually create much more successful transformation. And I think also opportunities in this, in understanding that you should chunk them up. So usually what I see as well is that you take way too big chunks too fast. Better take small steps all the time instead of taking huge chunks in at once. So I think that if you work with this correctly, then you can change the statistics that we were just talking about earlier, going from these 80-90% of failure to success instead. So that's the big opportunity I see for the future, if people start really working with this differently.
It's a great point around the smaller, chunking things out into smaller bite-sized pieces. There's a Shel Silverstein poem that I used to read my kids, and it went something like this. There was a girl, her name was Melinda May. She thought she could. She wanted to eat this monstrous whale. She thought she could. She said she would, so she started right at the tail. And everyone said, Melinda, you're much too small, but that didn't bother Melinda at all. She took little bites and chewed very slow, just like a good girl should. So basically, she ate this whale, but she ate it how? Bite by bite by bite, chunk by chunk. And what happens when you take the smaller bite, those begin to stack up over time. James Clear writes about this in Atomic Habits, the idea of 1%. Exactly. The 1% is exponential. And now we measure progress by where we've come from, and that creates additional momentum to continue forward, because it raises the energy once again. It's like, man, look at us. We're succeeding. We're making progress. We've come a long way.